To public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any matter not listed in agenda, provided that it is within the subject matter jurisdiction of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Do we have anyone here or on Zoom?
No comments.
If not, I'm going to close the public comment and move to consent calendar, which is number 1, approve minutes of May 12th, 2023, Finance and Administration Committee meeting. May we, I think we have the, do we have a staff report or we just,
We have minutes in there.
it's in this.
Yeah, I move to approve the meeting minutes.
All right.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussions? If not, I'll move for a vote.
Thank you. Chair Way,
Yes,
Director Walia,
Aye.
Dr. Schozola.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
thank you. Well, now we're going into regular calendar number 2, CEO update. I believe our CEO is here.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Yeah, so very quick update. We're very pleased to tell you that we have got an upgrade in our credit rating from Moody's Investor Services. I want to thank obviously all our board members. This is a long-term kind of improvement, right? So these are previous boards, the current board. I want to give kudos to Amrit, who just pulled all this together and putting the best possible face to all the good things we're doing and all the work we've done in pulling together reserve levels. So Moody's actually stated that our reserve levels and updating our reserve levels was a contributor to the upgrade. PPA portfolio strategy was also a contributor. So when they last rated us back in 2019, we didn't have our PPAs online. Today, we have 7 projects online, close to 40% coming from long-term contracts. So that adds to stability in our costs. We are very pleased to see that. They also gave us some targets as to what could lead to an upgrade. And I'm also teeing that up because Amrit will bring that up in item 3 as to what would lead to an upgrade. They also had some information about what will lead to a downgrade, which also is incorporated into what we brought to you before, the risk register and the risk analysis and all the stress tests we've done. So we feel very good about where we are, and that's my update.
Thank you. I'm going to open for questions and then public comment. Do we have any questions for Girish?
For me, it seemed pretty straightforward. I don't really have any questions at the moment.
If not, let's open for public comment. Do we have any present or Zoom?
No hands raised on Zoom, Chair.
Okay, so I'll close the public comments and let's move with, there's no action, just taking your report, right?
Yes.
I'll go to number 3. Recommended approval of fiscal year 2023-2024 proposed operating budget and affirmation of the current reserve policy target levels. And the staff speaking is Amrit.
Yes, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to go through the proposed budget, and in the next slide, I'm going to go through a timeline that's going to show you how we got to this point and what's ahead of us. But the ask of the committee today is 2 things. We ask that you recommend that the board adopt the proposed budget, and that the board adopt any revisions to the reserve policy, which I'll talk to. And there's a slight change to what we initially put in the presentation to what we're going to recommend now. And it's kind of alluding to what Girish mentioned earlier. This has to do with Moody's recommendation. And so we're going to make a slight change to our recommendation, and I'll go through that in detail. So the main areas of discussion today is I'm going to go through the key highlights first. If you remember, the last time the committee met, we went through the budget framework discussion in detail. Then at the last board meeting, we also went through a detailed discussion on the framework. And actually at the executive committee, we went through a preliminary review of the budget. So now we are at the point, each of those discussions, we said we were going to do final run of the numbers based on July market data, which we've done. So this, with any comments that the committee has, we will make those comments very quickly because we have to submit the materials for next week's board meeting this Friday. We'll have to post them. And then the board will get a chance to review the same draft budget. And so that we can incorporate the board's comments and then present the final budget for adoption in September. So today I'll go through the key highlights. I'll go through the proposed budget. You'll see one of the big items is the uncertainty in the budget is all around our revenues. How do we project our revenues, which is tied to PCIA projections and PG&E's generation rate projections. Then I'll go through our power supply costs, which is the biggest cost in the budget. More than 90% of our budget is power supply. And we'll compare it to the current fiscal year's budget, as was amended in March, the mid-year budget adjustment. And you'll see the numbers look very similar, but the dynamics are a little different. And we'll go through in details of that. Then I'll cover the other operating expenses. And the biggest change there has to do with staffing. We are asking for an increase in staffing. And then, of course, we have our adjustments for merit and cost of living adjustment proposal. And then we transfer each year, per the board policy, we transfer 2% of our revenues to programs fund. And we'll show you what that number looks like. And the last one is, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to review our reserve targets. And we're going to make recommendations as to what changes, how we should change any of these targets. Okay, so that's the agenda. And then we'll go into the presentation. Okay, so now I'm showing the timeline, and I kind of, in a way, covered it in my earlier discussion. So we're in August 1st right now. We're presenting this to the committee. We'll take it to the board, and we'll incorporate board's feedback. And then so we want to be in a position that when we go to the September board meeting, everything is ironed out. It's a quick, short meeting with the board, and the budget is adopted. And we have an approved, adopted budget at the start of our fiscal year, which starts October 1st. And then, like every year, we will do a mid-year adjustment in the mid-year budget in March. And that's because of all the volatility we have in forecasting the budget. The mid-year is a good point where we can true up and make revised projections. Okay. So next, I'll go through the key highlights. So this is in a snapshot, key takeaways of the proposed budget. You'll see that the year looks like it's going to be a positive year. We're in the black. So that's good. But the results are very uncertain. And they're more uncertain than we have had them in the past budget. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So the big uncertainty has to do, obviously, with the energy price volatility. Energy prices drive where PG&E's rates will come in. They drive where PCIA will come in, which then drives the rate that we can charge our customers. And then there's an additional layer of uncertainty around resource adequacy and RPS prices. They're very high, unlike prior years, substantially high. And that's making forecasting a little difficult. So if I compare the year over year, you'll see the biggest change is in revenues. Revenues dropped 84 million. And the main reason for that is higher PCIA and lower PG&E generation rates, basically not leaving enough room for us to charge, to provide our customers with a discount and remain competitive. And just to show you the volatility in the marketplace, had we done this forecast in March, I would have projected about 140 million higher in revenues. Wow. And this just tells you how volatile this energy market is and how quickly the market can change. And this ties to our reserve projections, why we need reserves, because these are the type of volatility we face. And you'll see the PG&Es, when they came up with the error forecast they issued that in May. May 15th of this year, as to what they project PCIA and PG&E, their rate to be, you'll see that those numbers look really good. And that's because they're based on market data as of March. But since that, fundamentals have weakened. Now, the other area that's adding a lot of uncertainty is the resource adequacy in RPS prices. They're adding additional uncertainty in the way we forecast. And the reason for that is CPUC basically has to come up with what's called a market price benchmark, and they'll come up with this number around fall of this year, which then PG&E will use to set the PCIA and PG&E generating their own generation rate. And basically, this is projecting as to what next year's RA and RPS prices will be. If we look at the marketplace right now, our RA is trading at very high levels, from around $6 to $7 a kilowatt month to like 12 or 12.75 dollars a kilowatt month. And RPS, instead of being around $12 to $15 a megawatt hour, it's around $45, $47 a megawatt hour. So very, very sharp increase. Normally, these elements have not been that volatile, but unlike energy prices are driven traded in a liquid forward market. So we can, any given moment in time, we can look into the marketplace and say, energy for delivery next year is trading at a certain price level. So we take the market data. We don't do our own forecast. We say market is where the market is. For RA and RPS, there's no forward market, liquid forward market, as there is for energy prices. So what the CPUC does in determining their market price benchmark, they basically look at where prices people have traded or have executed contracts for future delivery. It can expand a look back as far as 2 years ago. So we have no way of knowing what this MPV price that CPUC will issue. In doing our forecast, we have used the number that Newgen Consulting company provides. It's their model that we've been using to do PCIA and PG&E generate projections, and they've been very good. And we went through a lengthy discussion of that model in the budget framework discussion. We use those prices, and those prices are very low compared to the market prices, marginal market prices I mentioned right now. So if the PUC's market price benchmark comes somewhat closer to where the market is, holding other things constant, the budget numbers that I'm projecting should improve. Okay, so we are somewhat on a conservative side, but for good reason, right? So there's potential upside, but of course, if the forward energy market prices can continue coming down, that could pull the economics further down, right? So there's a lot of so the key point is there's a lot of uncertainty. From our point of view, we are projecting a budget that's somewhat on the conservative side. We don't have no way of assessing how conservative that is, but we think the market price benchmark should be higher than what we've used in modeling, and that should help with the PCIA and PG&E generate numbers. So that's the main story of the budget, is this uncertainty and forecasting revenues and forecasting what our rates that we can charge our customers. The other costs are there's not that much change. The power supply cost compared to last year's current fiscal year is almost flat. So you may say, I just talked about energy prices coming down. How come that's not pulling the cost down? A couple of drivers that are pulling it down, a couple of drivers that are pulling it up. So while energy prices are bringing it down, remember that a good chunk of our power procurement portfolio is hedged, right? So we've locked in prices. So only to the extent we're not locked in and unhedged, about 15% or so is subject to this downward movement. Then we have an increase in load. So we're going to be serving greater load. We're projecting that we're going to have full recovery from COVID. So our load is about 1.5% higher next year than compared to current year. So that's obviously pulling the cost up. And then RA and RPS prices, for our cost projections, we've used the market prices that we have to pay on the market. So that's pulling it up. So all in all, compared to current year, that's bringing power supply cost relatively flat. but the revenues are coming down. So therefore, our contribution to reserves is coming down significantly. At this point, we're forecasting about a 7.7 million contribution to reserves. Now, the other side is what customer discount should we grant? We're recommending for the remainder of the current year, that's within the new fiscal year from October to December, we continue at the current 4% discount until the new PG&E rates are in effect. So we don't want to do an untimely rate change. We want to time our rate change when PG&E changes. We don't want to have too many surprises for our customers in terms of rate changes. And this fiscal year is going to be very good. The current fiscal year is going to be very good. It's probably going to be better than what we forecasted. So there's no concern with that. But for the next fiscal year, in terms of setting the budget, what we're saying is follow the same strategy we used last year, which is, set a tentative discount level, but really change that discount level or change the rates once we have more certainty with PG&E and PCI rates. And that will be in the fall, around November timeframe. CPUC will vote in December. Once we have more certainty on what the likely rates that they'll adopt, we will do a mini budget refresh where we'll refresh the revenue and cost projections, power supply cost projections, not the full detailed budget. And then we can make a more informed decision to the board as to what level of discount to adopt, therefore what level of rates to charge for next fiscal year. Okay. So for setting the budget, we've assumed a 1% discount for all customers, effectively an overall 2% discount, with a 1% discount for all customers, but 1% translated into dollar bill credits for our low-income customers. So it's about $3.14 million. Okay, and the item number 3 here, the other major component of the budget is the change in our personnel cost, labor cost, and that's primarily driven by 9 additional positions since the last fiscal year. And I'll go into more details of that. And then we're also asking for a cost of living plus a merit increase of about, on average, about 7.5% for employees. And this is an average number. It's what any individual employee gets is based on CEO discretion that takes into account a number of factors. In coming up with this, we budgeted 3% for merit increase and about 4.5% for cost of living adjustment based on Bay Area CPI. Okay. And then we're saying, let's delay decision on any additional funding for programs or set aside for the building fund. If you remember when we had the budget framework discussion, we talked about setting aside 20 million for a building fund. We don't have to make that decision now. We can decide later. But we, staff, will continue looking at opportunities as the market presents themselves, because we think it could be more economical to have a building and more suitable for our operation to align with the way we're working, than to continue renting it. So we're going to continue to pursue those alternatives, and we'll bring proposals to the board. But we can delay the decision on any funding set aside for now. Those are the main highlights, and now I'm going to go into the overview of the budget. Is that on the wrong slide? Okay, so this is the makeup of the 7.7 million bottom line. It's comparing it to current fiscal year as we had adjusted that at the mid-year. You can see, for current fiscal year, we're forecasting about close to 74 million contribution to reserves. So it's a big reduction. And the big story, as I mentioned earlier, is a reduction in revenue. And that's primarily driven by uncertainty around PCIA and PG&E gen rate, which I'm going to go into detail in the next slide. Okay, so here, first bar is our current rate. So these are system average rates. They will vary for each individual customer, the low weighted system average rate. You can see PCI is very low. We're giving a 4% discount. We're enjoying a very healthy margin right now for this year. But next year, if we had gone with the ERA forecast, what PG&E put out, as I mentioned, they based their economics with March data using March 27 forward prices. We would have increased our margin by on average by 6%, as opposed to reducing it by 27%. Using latest market data. So if we just went with what PG&E put out in May, PCIA would have gone negative. And our margin would have actually increased while the rate that the customer would have seen for our gen rate would have been lower. It's like it was a win-win. And the reason for that is because of the negative PCIA. But the reality is when we using the new gen model, as we said at the budget framework, we use the new gen model to forecast PCIA and PG&E gen rate. We monitor this on a weekly basis. When we calibrated the model to the PG&E's error forecast, it was very close, it was within 5%. So we know, remember the uncertainty around RA and our RPS prices. We think even PG&E are using the numbers that are close to in the new gen model that are conservative. That's part of the reason, another reason why we don't want to use more aggressive RA and RPS projections, because PG&E knows what's traded in the market. So if you look at the same, using the same model now and running it with the current market data, again, for energy forward prices, but staying with the same RA and RPS prices, our rate that we can charge the customer drops significantly. It's down 27%, from on average 14.8 cents kilowatt hour to about 10.26 cents a kilowatt hour. PCI, instead of being 0.28 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what it is now, and instead of PG&E's projection of a negative, it's actually going to be close to 1.2. With the footnote earlier that there's potential that this could improve if energy prices are deteriorate further, and if the CPUC comes in with the higher RA and RPS prices that we're hoping for in their benchmark. So giving a 1% discount, staying competitive, this is what's driving the big reduction in revenue projection for next year. So next we'll look at the power supply cost. As I mentioned earlier, there's drivers. You can see these boxes, some are negative, some are positive. We end up with basically at the same level as last year. But while energy prices, dropping energy prices to the extent we're unhedged, are bringing the cost down. To the extent we have higher RA and RPS prices, that bringing the cost up, and to the extent we have additional load of about another 1.5%, that's increasing the cost up. So when you take the pluses and the minuses, the power supply cost is close to where it's at the level where it is for the current fiscal year, while the revenues are significantly lower. Now, some details on the other operating expenses. So I said, the big component here is personnel costs, and that's from adding 9 additional full-time positions from last year to this year. And I'll talk about that more in detail about what makes up that 9th position in the next slide. 1.5 million there is, every year we forecast a vacancy savings of 5%, but in the mid-year budget, we took actual savings. And we were more than 5%, had more than 5% vacancy. So when comparing it to the mid-year budget, it shows a big increase now that we're projecting to be more fully staffed. And then the COLA and the merit increase that I talked about. And then there's slight increase in other expenses of about $680,000. And all of the non-power supply expenses, we budget a 5% contingency just as a contingency. And one thing we have not addressed here is any changes to employee benefits. We are looking at some ways in which we can increase benefits package to promote employee retention. We will bring those proposals at a later time in the fiscal year as we're closer to developing them. Okay, and then the others are the transfers, the as I said, 2% per the board policy, we always transfer 2% of our projected revenues to programs funds. The 2.2 million there from nuclear allocation savings, I think Monica in a previous board meeting went through that. Right. No,
Only when we first got the authority to get the nuclear allocations, but we haven't since
okay.
then gone to the board.
Yeah, so the part per the policy, we basically redirect the savings that we get from taking allocations from PG&E for nuclear allocations, and we direct it to our programs. So we're transferring that savings to our programs. And then the other transfer is basically the bill credit that I talked about, 1% customer discount translated to dollar bill credits for low income customer. That's about $3.14 million.
So all of this, the 3 line items here, they add up to, what is it? About 14 plus.
Yeah,
That's all that will be additionally added to the programs. Based on where we are today, 8.8, 2.2.
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
not the 3.3. That's the 3.1. That's just
Oh, that's, yes.
credit to the customer. Just
Yes,
the
yes.
8.8.
That is
and the
going
2.3.
directly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so some details on the 9 staffing positions that we're asking for. So the board authorized last year the CEO Personnel Authority, and on the left side, I've summarized what the authority gives the CEO: ability to approve and change titles, swap positions as long as they're within the approved budget, and to increase headcount but not to exceed 10% and stay within the budget. So the CEO used the personnel authority for 2 positions, 2 of the 9. So in reality, we're at the proposed budget, the incremental positions we'll be adding will be 7. But when I compare to last fiscal year, it's 9 additional positions, 2 of which is coming from the CEO personnel authority. Does that make sense? So last year, our headcount was 49. We're increasing it by 9 positions. Right. But of the 49, we've already, using the CEO personnel authority, we've increased it by 2. So we have 7 more positions that we're asking for explicit approval. The other 2 are within the CEO personnel authority, and those 2 positions are, one is an associate data scientist position, and that's a former employee who was in a programs team, was a guest star, left for a graduate program and stayed with us on a part-time basis. Colleen McNanny, if you remember her. She's now joined us starting this month, back as a full-time, but in a different role as a data scientist, associate data scientist. And then the other position is senior regulatory analyst position. We had intended to fill this position last year, but we had to swap it for a new role that was created for Don Gray. So we're filling that now. So those 2 are being filled under the personnel authority. Then the other positions, the remaining 7 positions, we're asking for 3 additional headcounts in our marketing department. And they're primarily focused on marketing efforts for program growth and adoption. We have a lot of funding, dedicated programs. We have a lot of program initiatives, but to move the needle on them, we need to actively promote and market them. So that's a big chunk of our ask, is 3 for marketing staff. And then we're asking 1 additional headcount in programs for program specialist community programs to design and implement, continue to design additional programs that can be deployed in the community. And then 3 are in Monica's group in the 4Pro team. 2 additional other than the one senior regulatory analyst being filled under the CEO Personnel Authority. The other two is, one is a data engineer. There's a lot of data in handling and managing the PPAs, operationalizing them, settling them. There's a lot of need to coordinate and manage the data streams. And we're also implementing, if you remember our business process optimization initiative, we're implementing a very detailed software that's has a lot of data management capabilities. We need a person who can basically handle all that data integration work. And then we're asking for one management analyst, or it could be an administrative analyst, to basically coordinate all the various activity within the team. It's a large team with a lot of activities, and to be efficient and effective, we need an administrative or analyst level support there. And then the last ask is in the finance team. We're asking for a senior financial analyst to basically support the work of the organization in budgeting, accounting, and all the financial analysis that goes on in managing the organization's finances.
Do you have any questions? One on note, Director Margaret Abakova came in. Yeah. Do you have any questions for our CFO, Amrit?
I'm still.
You haven't done, right?
Couple more
Yeah.
slides to go to, yeah.
So far, do you have any questions?
Yeah, feel free to ask me
Yeah.
anytime.
I was curious about the education or the programs. Are they mostly education based, like for consumers, or like what kind of programs are we talking about exactly? I'm familiar with, some of them, but if we're increasing that as well with more marketing, like what direction are we going exactly with that?
Yes, so just to step back. We have more than $80 million set aside for programs. So these are programs like the heat pump water heater program. And we're staffing up to increase our capacity to be able to deliver these programs.
Okay,
So EV charging programs, so it's building side, transportation side, load reduction, conservation side, not conservation, but load reduction. So this is something that the board has prioritized, and yeah, so that's what this program is.
Yeah, that's cool. And I was curious if there's also any like more of the like early education type programs, like maybe for like early adoption, like, obviously getting into the kids' heads, like, hey, this is really important, electrification. Like, I really love the film project. Like for me, I was like, oh, that's amazing, And so I'm wondering if there's gonna be a little bit more focus on things of that nature, or if it's gonna be much more focused on what you just said.
So I'm gonna step back, actually, post this meeting, I'll send you some information.
Okay.
Which actually, on a quarterly basis, we provide the board as part of the CEO report. An update on all the programs we have. And actually, at the next board meeting next week, you'll have an update. So there are more than 20 programs that we're providing. So that'll give you a good overview. And actually, Justin Zagunis is looking at a board study session in the next quarter or so to go over that. So similar to what Monica did on clean energy and reliability, we'll do that for programs, because
Fantastic.
the board has added programs over the years, but we've not really had like a study session where we have a comprehensive look at all of them. So we'll have that to you. What you talked about early education, I don't think we have something at, say, elementary school or middle school level. We do have more on the high school level outreach, but let us get back to Adam and Pamela with to answer that question.
Okay, great.
One quick comment on that, we're talking about it. My observation in Saratoga, the kids are really interested.
Yeah.
So are the families. Personally, my hands are tied, because then as a council member, I could be trespassing on the school boards.
Yeah.
Whereas SVCE may be able to, I've thought about it informally. I've seen SVCE's presence there. And to assume that the city can do it, there are two separate bodies, and we have to be very cautious about that. So I kind of
Yeah.
support what Elliot is saying here.
Yeah.
And if we can do something, see, SVC does a great job anyway.
Yeah, if I may, and I don't like saying, so yes, but essentially, when you think about, say, school kids across the service territory, we don't have the bandwidth to actually do these things. It's just too much.
Yes.
And so it becomes a prioritization of the urgency of the requirement for reducing emissions. Where do we best spend our money?
Nice.
But let me take it back to Adam and Pam. We may be able to leverage other resources, right? So there may be other channels that are already established at elementary school levels or middle school levels that we can tap into to maybe fund additional education on electricity and emission reductions.
I'm thinking more, whatever we have in place, even if we are able to, with minimal effort, I completely agree with you. The SVCE can't go into all the schools and take that. That's a humongous task. But whatever we have, if we can create channels of communication, just passing that information on, you guys can do it with, as I personally feel as council.
Correct. No, I get the sensitivity between what city council authorities are, school board, but we remove from it. So we capture that as a
Thank you.
idea. to
Thank you.
take.
Thank you. Because I see students very interested and they ask,
Definitely.
and they are exploring other channels.
Yeah.
Without realizing, hey, this is SVCE.
No, we'll add it in because we also have climate fellows who we've hired for doing that outreach to younger folks, so.
Along those lines, I know you had me over there, but the youth climate action group, and then they have their big conference of 200 students. I know that we funded them in the past. Is that an ongoing relationship we have?
I know we were involved in the initial stages with
Okay.
Kaushik Tota and others to really initiate this.
Yes,
Let me check. I don't know
okay.
what exactly we're doing with them right now.
I think that would be like just continuing that
Yeah.
partnership
Yeah.
would be an ideal way to, continue to work with their youth, but they're their own nonprofit, I believe, so.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty standalone, but I think there's like a county.
Correct. There's
Environmental.
$2 million set aside. Senator Cortese managed to get that money.
Mhm.
And yes, so that money is starting to be programmed now.
Okay,
So, yeah.
yeah. It'd be great. It'd be great to have the overview too, because I
Yeah.
know we're doing a whole bunch of programs.
Yeah, yeah.
Know all of them, and if someone asks.
Yeah,
me,
And actually, I'm pretty sure it's coming into the August board meeting CEO report. We're updating our quarterly report on programs, so you'll see it in a new format.
Oh, great.
And as part of the CEO report, I'll highlight it in verbal comments and
Sounds
bring it
good.
back to your attention.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, one other comment, because I know I have reached out to Garish on something
Yeah.
similar. So I, as a board member, am not privy to so many things and I can't retain its information overload. At one point, we were talking, and I know Pam has made the changes to have information accessible on the website
Mhm.
for us so that we are not consuming your time. There are way too many of us, right?
Yeah.
13 plus 13 alternates.
Mhm.
And if something like this, depending on staff time and effort and how much it costs us, if some of these resources, as Margaret just brought out, some of these, if there is a place that online is available,
Mhm.
so when, for example, when kids in my city reach out to me about anything,
Mhm.
all I have to do is send them a link.
Yeah.
Because I can't be the expert in these, rather than me reaching out to you, which you have been very kindly able to help me with information. All I'm doing is sending them a link.
Yeah.
They work and then the message spreads through the community.
Yeah.
Without very direct involvement from SVC.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Yeah, we'll take these ideas in and talk to Adam and Pam. Okay. Thank you.
So I have a question on your.
Yeah.
On your current staffing, So 43 full-time, but minus the 7 vacancies, right? Or
Plus the
43 plus the
Yeah,
7.
actually, we were at the data scientist analyst, we did hire already, so I should say 43 is more like 44. Right, John?
Okay, and then is there any plan to fill the current
Yeah.
vacancies?
Oh, completely.
Okay.
So we plan to fill all the current vacancies. So I think bottom line here, we are going from 49
Mhm.
to 58.
Okay, so that's the 9, that's,
The 9, of which 2 are already hired.
Right.
So, but just say if you move forward 12 months and we fill all the vacancies we have,
mhm,
we'll have 58 employees.
understand,
And
okay,
if I may make one comment, when
Mhm.
we shared an earlier draft with the board, with the executive committee, we got some feedback to go back and take another look. So we started with 12 positions actually, and we've reduced it to 9.
mhm,
And this has to do with Justin's group, DPP. We've reduced the ask because it gets to the program uptake, actually. We may need additional positions, but let's see how the program uptake is. However, we do need folks on the marketing side to increase capacity to push these programs out.
okay, understand, okay, thank you. All right,
Okay,
let's continue.
so I will go to the next slide, which is the review the reserve targets. So last year, we set up this process. Remember, we do this with the stress test analysis, and at the last committee meeting and at the last board meeting in June, we went through the stress test analysis, which basically looks at credible risks that can be extreme but plausible risks that our organization faces because of the industry we're in. And if those conditions were to materialize, what it would mean for us. And we've done the analysis and we refreshed the stress test analysis we shared with the board in June, using the same market data that we were using to develop the budget so that they're consistent. And using the stress test analysis, we basically assess the adequacy of our reserve target levels. And the criteria we discussed is we want to target the next 2 fiscal years reserve such that if the model stress test scenario were to occur, in other words, prices were to drop, PCIA were to go up significantly, PG&E's rates were to drop, our revenues would drop significantly, our power supply cost doesn't come down commensurately because of locked-in hedges, we will have quite a bit of erosion of margin, right? And to maintain competitive with 1%, at least 1% discount to customers. So if that scenario were to happen, there will be a huge pull from the reserves, and we want to model that scenario so that if the pull were to happen, we don't go below 120 days on a model basis, 120 days of cash on hand. And then we also look at a longer risk on a longer term horizon, looking at 5 years. We don't have to be as stringent as over 2 years. We say over 5 years, we want, if the stress test were to occur, we don't want the upper reserve threshold to fall below, set the upper threshold such that if the stress test scenario were to occur, we don't fall below 90 days of cash on hand. Okay. So the current reserve targets, which we updated last year, are the minimum of 120 days, a target level of 285 days, and upper target of 490 days. When we refresh it for the stress test this year, the implied targets are 120 minimum. Well, the minimum we don't change, but the goal from 285 increased slightly to 300 days, and upper actually came in where it was. And this is just a modeling. Each time you update a model, you get a different result, slightly up and down because of the volatility and movement of prices. So when we developed the presentation, our recommendation was, well, the targets are kind of in line with, 300 is not that far off 285. And then remember, I talked about us being somewhat conservative in the way we model this year's budget with the modeling of RPS and RA prices. We think CPUC's market price benchmark hopefully will be higher than what we modeled them at. So because of that, we thought, and the closeness of it, we thought there's probably no reason to change it, and changing it has no real practical implication in the business because we're not near hitting any of these target levels, target or the upper target. So we thought let's just keep it the same. But since we prepared our materials, we, as Girish mentioned, we had Moody's do a credit rating, and they upgraded our credit rating. And as Girish mentioned, one of the key criteria that they look at is basically liquidity, you know, and with that basically for us means the reserves. And they cited in their report, you know, part of the credit positive aspects of our business was the fact that we changed our reserve target from 230 to 285 days. And some of the factors that they listed, or one of the factors that they listed among others that could lead to a credit upgrade is having reserved in excess of 300 days of cash on hand. So given that the report just came out and the stress test also implied 300, and we want to signal to the credit community that we're listening to them, we thought it'd be appropriate to change this target to 300 as opposed to keep it at 285. So we are making this proposed change right now in our recommendation that the committee recommended the board to actually change the reserve policy by changing the goal target level from 285 days to 300 days of cash on hand.
One clarification on that. So I follow those are the current numbers, that table there. And the left side, what you have talked of, the worst case scenario for the under the stress test. That's essentially the comfort zone for us to be aware that we're looking at 120 and 90 in the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
With all the conservative, all the variables that you have put in, we should most likely be on that right hand setting.
Yeah, we'd want to be close to 285 to 300 to feel somewhat comfortable.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So this is showing a reserve projection. We're forecasting end of year or beginning of next fiscal year. End of next fiscal year reserve ending at 285 million, which is 229 days of cash on hand. And we're showing over 5 years, we will build towards the 300 number. But again, this has some level of conservatism built in. But really putting out a projection 5 years when the prices are so volatile, you can't really count on it. That's part of the reason why we need the reserves. As I mentioned earlier, just from March to now, prices have changed such that to change our revenue projection, drop our revenue projections by 140 million. So you can see how volatile energy prices are. But anyways, we are in good position and we're continuing to build to reserves, and that's something we have to keep in mind. Okay, so that was the main aspects of this budget. I'm just going to highlight and summarize it. So the biggest risk again includes the lady adjustment to PCIA and PG&E generation rate, which we won't know for certainty until last CPUC meeting in December, and hopefully we'll have an inkling of what that rate will be in around fall and November timeframe, so we can then come back and advise the board what final rate changes we should adopt. Basically meaning what the actual level of discount we should adopt, whether we should continue with 1% or if there's room for improvement. One thing I will say is we're not asking for additional funding for programs, but if you look at programs, there is a need for continued funding in programs to move the needle on our decarbonization goals. So that's something to always keep in mind. We don't need to make that decision now because the amount of the funds that we have right now you know, is gonna more than adequately engage the staff that we have. In fact, we need more staff to actually promote and push those programs forward. So it has no practical implication right now, but anytime we look at financial projections, if the year does turn out to be good, just keep in mind the discounts, once you give it, they're gone. But program dollars, you know, we will have a need for those program dollars in the upcoming years. And then the other thing that I'll remind the committee is that, you know, we will continue to assess some benefit enhancements. We may come back to the committee and the board with some proposals to enhance employee retention and do something there on the benefit side. And then we will continue assessing opportunities for looking at building purchase as opposed to leasing. But we don't have to do any funding for that right now, and we'll come back to the board at a later time in the committee.
Can I ask something real quick about the building purchase? So it seems like it got put maybe on the back burner a little bit right now, and is that correct? And
We're gonna continue looking at opportunities, and if an attractive opportunity were to come in, we'll come back to the board.
okay,
But
so
we don't think we need to make a funding decision at this point.
I see. So it's kind of like if you see something that looks like, oh, we should jump on this, then you'll bring it. Okay.
This is an economical decision for
Sure.
long term,
Makes sense.
and we're gonna be around for a long time.
Right on.
So
At
that
least till the end of our last PPA, right?
Prepaid bonds.
Oh, that's true.
we'll keep on adding more PPAs, so that they keep on going.
It's from now plus 20 years.
30.
30.
30, and then we'll add more PPAs, so that's a moving target of 30 years. The $20 million for the possible building reserve. Is that included in all the numbers that you're talking?
We will come back.
No, I know we are not setting it aside, but all the numbers that we are looking at, that 20 million is not sitting separate. It is all within here, if that helps.
It's in the
Yeah.
reserves.
It-
We will be
within.
moving it out of the reserves. We'll be shrinking the reserves.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that
Yeah,
point.
oh, that makes a lot of sense.
This question on, the real estate market is volatile,
Yes.
and so, I appreciate, your wanting to engage us, but I also don't want to miss an opportunity if one arises and, in other venues we're talking about just giving authority to, at least or what sign a contract or whatever it is. How would that work? If there were some great opportunity to purchase something that market's, it's the buyer's market these days. Yeah.
So one thing, maybe the finance committee to consider comments, and we can take it as subject, that's why we think about it. Kind of give us direction to actively monitor
Mhm.
and be opportunistic.
Mhm.
So it's almost like we can continue to do the analysis and outreach.
Mhm.
And if we see a good opportunity, then we'll come back to you
Mhm.
and ask for funding. The issue with putting aside the funding right now, it frankly doesn't, we basically will be taking money out of reserve.
Right.
So from a bottom line standpoint, it doesn't look very good. But we do have, as Amrit has shown, we have a pretty healthy reserve. And the
Okay.
assumptions we're using are quite conservative.
Mhm.
So it's gonna take us a few months to do that research and so if you basically tell us,
Mhm.
keep your eye on that ball,
Mhm.
we'll take it as encouragement and direction from the finance committee,
Mhm.
and we'll just do that.
Yeah, I would definitely say keep the eye on that ball personally, like, yeah,
Yeah.
like, cause I'm one that I just. It's like, oh, you're paying a lease, you're just like throwing money down the drain, where it's like, oh, this is our building, it just,
Yeah. Yeah. I was literally sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Reading an article right now where the office vacancy rate
Yes, it's
has
huge.
finished at a historic high of 21.6.
Some as high as 30%, a lot of the cities right around here are saying.
Yeah.
Actually, Campbell,
Mhm.
30.7%.
I was just about to say, so yeah, what's
Mountain
built by the building in Campbell, come on now.
What is it? 6.2?
Mountain View is 26.2, Santa Clara is 32.5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In San Jose airport area is, they say 42%. So we just got this
that's crazy.
article, so,
And we're dealing with that at the air district,
Yeah.
so, because like we own that building.
Right.
And so we're losing on our
Mm.
rent, so, we just, yeah, gave authority to the director to be able to, sign leases quickly. So that's why, and then, so that kind of leads to, in terms of our lease here, is there any negotiating power we have given the vacancy rates? Or are
Good
are we
question.
locked in?
we can take a look at it because I'm sure if we want to ask for a reduction, they'd want something more like an extension of the
Longer
lease.
lease, right.
And so right now, we don't have enough room in this
Mm.
place.
Okay.
Yeah,
So even now, when we get our employees back, say like we have our all hands retreat, which we'll have on August 10th and 11th. There just aren't enough conference rooms for people to comfortably sit in here. And given our increase, so our current lease expires September 2025.
Mm.
Mhm.
So it's quite a ways out,
Mm.
but we should actively be looking about 12 to 18 months before.
Yeah.
Sure.
And given the downturn in the market,
Mhm.
so that's where we're looking at. So I think we look at both buying a building and maybe even leasing. So we look at both opportunities. We'll talk to Biagini about options also.
So then the 20 million, is that, I'm sorry, is that already, that is set aside or it's not?
No.
So then, because we create reserves, like when we set aside money, we have a strategic, property acquisition fund. So if we do that, then doesn't that just show up as part of our bottom line? So it wouldn't affect things like our credit rating and whatnot? It's just another reserve fund. So could we
Yeah,
do
that's
that?
that's what in the budget framework we were going the path of. Just as we do with programs, we set aside programs, but until we spend it, the money still sits in our reserves. That's how
Yes.
that would work.
Uh-huh.
We would set aside an additional 20 million or whatever the amount we agree on in a building fund. It will just sit there, it will still be part of reserves, but it'll be board authorized to spend towards the building purchase.
Okay.
We can do that. That's what our original thinking was, but we can do that at a later time. We
Okay.
decided not to do that given the uncertainty and frankly, it's gonna take us time. It's not having that set aside is not gonna slow us down right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, we'll take whatever actions are necessary to select to explore it.
Mhm.
But we just didn't want to put it down the bottom line because it's not going to show up well enough financially. But whatever actions we have to take right now, we do.
Because otherwise, the way we show our operating budget, I would show a negative number,
Mm.
right? And that just doesn't look.
Right, that makes sense.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
so if there are any other questions or comments before we go vote?
Let's open up for public comment if we have no questions. Anybody on Zoom or here?
I have a comment,
Sure.
just half a
Yes,
joke,
yes,
but
please.
now that Congress is talking about us having UFO technologies, do you think that might make the market a little more volatile if like said technologies come out all of a sudden?
We'll ask ChatGPT.
Ah,
Get
yes.
back to you.
Thank you. The AI will tell us, all right. Oh. It's all coming into focus now.
So, no public comment?
Nobody has their hands raised, but I'm gonna unmute Vice Chair Meadows.
Sure.
Just to see if she has any.
All right, Sally.
Vice Chair, if you are there and you'd like to have a moment to say something?
Okay, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. I can't compete with UFOs, so or whatever they are now, UAPs, I think, something like that. So as usual, this was a really well done presentation. I really don't have anything significant to add. I did see one clarification on the last slide that was just up that wasn't on earlier, the 1% plus, so the projected 1% in the new fiscal year plus the 1% for low income. You clarified on the slide we were just looking at that it is an additional 1%, and that wasn't clear on the earlier slide. I thought it was something about the 1% was given to low income in a different form than it was given to non-low income customers, but you're not saying that, you're saying it's an additional 1%, at least in the slide we were just looking at. So I think that clarification would be helpful, because I assumed it was 1% for everybody, but there was a different way of paying out. It's minor, but really excellent. I think it's realistically conservative, and it makes so much sense. So I appreciate that and allowing me to comment as a member of the public.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Okay, no other comments. I'll close the public comment period. Go back to the directors. Any more comments, discussions?
Just, I'm really pleased to see, the conservative approach, like I've voiced it several times about, like, yes, more reserves, the better, and I like that. It seems like the credit rating, and we're pushing even further for more reserves. I'm really happy and pleased to see that, and just keep it up. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is an action item. So does anybody want to make a motion?
I have a comment.
Oh, yes, please.
So the comment is, thank you once again for putting together a very conservative budget. Reminder yet again of the extreme volatility in the market. And the fact that this is what we are looking at today, the reality will happen in December once CPUC makes the decision, which impacts both the PCIA as well as the gen rate. And they end up moving in the wrong directions for us. It impacts us. So it's good that we have a very conservative approach with high levels of reserves, so that overall, from one year to the next, we are stable for the long term, the 30+ years, as we are saying, the evolving 30 years for SVCE to stay. And I'm very pleased to see where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
I'm happy to make the motion to approve the recommended budget.
Is a
Recommend to the board.
Oh, I'm sorry, recommend approval of the 23-24 proposed operating budget and affirmation of the current reserve policy.
actually, we have a slight change to the second one. Maybe we can bring
Okay,
that
yeah.
slide up.
Let's bring a slide up.
300 days for 290.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
update the reserve.
Of change the reserve policy. Okay, so to approve the proposed operating budget and change the reserve policy to increase days cash on hand from a target of 285 days cash on hand to 300 days cash on hand.
Second.
All right, we have a motion second. Any further discussions? If not, roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair White,
Yes.
Director Walia,
Aye.
Director Schozola,
Aye.
Director Abikova. Thank you. That motion carries with Director Nunes absent.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to any committee or staff remarks? No, if not, we can go for adjournment, but do we have a next meeting schedule already?
Not yet.
No, okay.
No, right now, this one will go to the board
Or, okay.
next Wednesday.
Mhm.
And I think for the finance committee, we don't plan on meeting with you before budget approval.
Okay.
I think.
All right, so we will adjourn the meeting at 2:05. Thank you.